Burnout during service. My name is Khadija Carr, and I'm presenting from Vista headquarters in Washington, D.C.
And I'm Chris Hawks. You will also see our colleagues Brittany Madison and Barbara Reynolds in the chat and Q&A, and Brittany will also be presenting towards the end of the webinar, as well as our colleagues from LSI, Kim and Jeff. And before we get started on the agenda for today, we'd like to acknowledge that the Vista program attracts individuals who are motivated, enthusiastic, hardworking, innovative, passionate, and yeah, we could go on for a while on that, but you really get the picture. And that means many of you won't stop working until you are satisfied. And you also probably have a hard time saying no because you're deeply dedicated to your Vista service and the community you're serving in. Excuse me. Or the agency you're partnering with. Many of you are serving at underdeveloped organizations because that's what Vista is about. So it's normal for you to occasionally feel stressed because Vista isn't always easy. With that said, it's important to take care of yourself and take advantage of the strategies and anecdotes that we'll share with you during the session, in addition to maybe any that your fellow Vistas may share. Vistas are notorious for making something out of nothing, and I hope you keep all of this in perspective throughout your service. And now, Khadija, you want to kick us off by starting with today's agenda?
I sure will. Thanks so much, Chris. So this is really an important Vista-focused topic. It has relevance because it can hopefully impact your Vista year and beyond in a very positive way if you choose to apply the coping strategies we'll share to prevent burnout. Our agenda for today includes 3 specific topics. The first is defining and identifying symptoms of burnout. Second, developing and implementing effective coping strategies and skills. And we will end by addressing some of the issues frequently identified by Vista members that create a high risk for burnout if not managed. So let's begin. To start out, we'd like to hear from you. How exactly would you describe burnout? Please take a moment to enter your ideas in the chat box. And as a reminder, the chat box is located to the right of the slides. So I see some folks are saying burnout equals no joy, no sleep, wearing yourself out or down, being overwhelmed,
unmotivated,
feeling irritated or tired or stressed out, working relentlessly until you become sick. I'm seeing a lot of folks feeling drained, losing faith in what they initially started out doing, maybe getting aggravated with the organization, again, losing sleep,
apathetic, exhausted,
impatient, irritable, depressed, no motivation, overwhelmed. Wow, so these are a lot of really key things to burnout. Thanks so much for your input. We're going to now share a definition that we feel really truly captures burnout. So what exactly is burnout, right? It is, in general, a lack or loss of homeostasis, wherein we find ourselves in a state of imbalance. This is due to chronic events in which environmental demands, internal demands, or both tax or exceed the adaptive resources that any one individual has. Let's take a look at some of the symptoms. Over a period of time, burnout can lead to a physical, emotional, and mental exhaustion that's not easily relieved by sleep, rest, or even vacation or time off. Often we are overcome by apathy or unease that makes us feel like nothing we're doing is meaningful or even making any difference at all. Persistent negativity and cynicism can actually lead to experiencing physical symptoms such as headaches, indigestion, or backaches. And unchecked, Burnout can cause us to emotionally pull away from others we work with as we find ourselves being easily irritated by them. This not only leads to an unpleasant work environment, but it can also lead to a loss in productivity and cause your work performance to really suffer. In general, we feel disengaged, unmotivated, with a deep sense of disillusionment. And internally, we're not really content with others and sometimes ourselves. You may find that stress and burnout are used interchangeably, but how exactly do you believe burnout differs from stress? Let's take a look and see. So while the two do share some characteristics, there are distinct differences between stress and burnout. Stress is relatively short-term, and it's often caused by a feeling that work or a specific stimulus is out of control. You might experience stress several days in a row, especially if you're working on a large project or under a really tight deadline. And when stress affects you over the long term, however, it raises your risk for burnout. Burnout often takes place over a longer period of time. It usually strikes people who are highly committed to the work that they're doing because you can only really burn out if you have been invested in the first place. So Vistas really are at a high risk for burnout as you frequently apply to and start positions where you're energized and motivated with lofty goals related to the elimination of poverty. But the core difference between stress and burnout is being tired versus exhausted, or being inspired versus disillusioned. And many of you touched on some of these points in our earlier chat question. So now that we have a working definition for burnout, we have identified some of its symptoms and made a distinction between stress and burnout, noting what a high risk vistas are for burnout, given your deep commitment and potential for chronic stressors. A primary cause of burnout is really frail personal boundaries. So boundaries protect us and keep other people from imposing themselves onto us. And when our boundaries are weak, we become more fearful about hurting other people's feelings, maybe being rejected or criticized, or being seen as incompetent. Weak boundaries may also make it hard to communicate our capacity and needs, resulting in overextension or prioritization of other people's needs instead of our own. We'll also mention that financial insecurity, as well as any chronic or personal difficulties such as health issues, can also play a really large role in causing burnout. Life changes can also contribute to a lesser extent, taking on a new, burnout, maybe when moving to a new city, dealing with the loss of a loved one, or even to a lesser extent, taking on a new challenge at work. Over time, all these individual stressors take a large emotional and mental toll on us, contributing to burnout if we are mismanaging ourselves. So we'd like to hear from you again. Please answer the poll question. We'll leave it open for about a minute because it is a quick question. You'll see that the Q&A is going to be covered in just a moment here with our poll questions. So here it is. In situations where you're being asked to perform beyond your capacity level, how strong would you say your boundaries are? Is it that they're always strong? Nope, can't do that, ask the next guy. Or often strong? I perform best without imposition, but I can lend a hand. Or sometimes strong? Super busy, but if you need my help, I'll drop everything. Or is it boundary? What's that? Take a moment to answer the poll question. So for folks answering the poll question, you'll need to scroll down to see the full extent of the responses. Otherwise, feel free to type your response in the chat.
So far, not a ton on the first or last response. A lot of Vistas are saying they're kind of in the middle, in the second or third, or often strong or sometimes firm. See as others, and kind of checking the chat. Do you see any Khadijah? He's often strong, something strong. Yeah, kind of in the middle.
Boundaries are clear, often strong. I see a few folks mentioning finances as a barrier. Alrighty, we can close the poll and we'll see where most folks responded. Alright.
Yeah, definitely mostly in the middle. And to kind of transition from that, we'll actually go over a couple resources that might be worth checking out for regarding self-reflection. So we encourage you all to really reflect on what your own risk for burnout may be. So definitely take a moment to consider some of the causes of burnout in your life right now as a Vista. What are some of the ongoing stressors in your life? How effective are your coping strategies for dealing with these stressors? So in addition to thinking about these types of reflection questions, which we not only recommend self-reflecting now, but absolutely throughout your Vista service if you ever start to feel fatigued, we're now going to share a few quick survey tools you can use to help expand your self-awareness, which is really the first step in managing your stressors in order to prevent burnout. So this first one is one we highly recommend, and it's the Mind Tools Burnout Survey. In this survey, you receive immediate results about burnout symptoms you might be experiencing, and can begin to choose to insert self-care activities and experiences into your schedule. So we have actually a link to this survey, and we'll reference this quite often in the helpful links document, which will have links to some of the tools and resources we're recommending. As Khadijah mentioned earlier, if you're on a smartphone or tablet and maybe you can't access the handouts to download, you can email vistatraining@cns.gov, and we will provide you with those documents. But back to the Mind Tools survey. So it's it's 15 question. It's an informal approach. So it's by informal, so it isn't to be used as an official diagnostic technique necessarily, but it is a very intuitive tool that you can use to get a quick overview or glimpse at your risk for burnout. I recently just retook this survey, and I kind of ended up right smack dab in the middle of the scores, where it let me know or recommended that I need to be careful. I'm maybe at risk of burnout, particularly if several of my individual scores are high. Fortunately for me, I didn't have many of the individual scores at the highest level, but it's still definitely a good reminder for me to be a little more careful and take care of myself. So besides identifying your potential burnout symptoms, which is what that Mind Tools survey is really good at, you'll also want to reflect on how well you manage or cope with your stressors. As Khadijah mentioned earlier, there is certainly a relationship between stress and burnout. When short-term stressors become chronic, indicating our coping strategies are ineffective, we are at risk for burnout. So we also want to make you aware of a quick survey you can use to identify and become aware of how well your coping strategies do or don't work for you. The ability to develop your self-awareness without judgment is crucial to enhancing your self-care. So beating ourselves up with self-criticism only adds to our stress. And the more self-aware you are about your coping skills, the more you realize where you need to focus on prevention strategies. So, on the Vista campus, there is a 20-statement self-awareness stress survey while we talk about self-awareness. Again, this link is in the handouts to download at the bottom of the slide in that pod. So taking this survey will help you identify the specific areas where you experience the highest difficulty or most ease managing your stressors. Again, this is quick, similar to that Mind Tool survey. It's 20 statements where you rate the accuracy of each prompt on a scale of 1 to 10. And then at the end, it gives a quick snapshot of your current stress levels. Here are 2 self-awareness statements from the survey that we provided, 2 out of the 20. Khadija and I both scored ourselves, as you can see on this, both to see how we compare and to give a quick demonstration for how you can all do this for yourself. So for instance, I gave myself a 5 for needing to improve my conflict resolution skills. So of course, conflict resolution is important and often a delicate line to be able to assert yourself while respecting others and conflict resolution. When I was serving in the Peace Corps, my conflict resolution skills were seriously put to the test. I served in a small village in Belize, and for various reasons that we don't need to get into, but there were some pretty strong divisions in the community that tended to rear its head whenever I happened to hold a meeting with the village council or a small business or even at the PTA. Always seemed to be some divisions that would come up. And there were times where I could kind of use my status as an outsider, almost as an agreed-upon arbitrator to help resolve conflicts during the meetings, using an impartial approach that respected everyone in the process. Of course, there were other times where that approach would be pretty ineffective. Well, that's a big reason why I give a 5. Sometimes that might have had to do with a language or cultural barrier, and other times it had to do with really finding that line of assertiveness, which sometimes I have difficulty with, and being able to properly gauge the room. And then on the other one, multitasking, challenge for me. It's a little bit higher rating I gave. And it's not that I don't feel that I can multitask. I mean, everyone multitasks, right? I mean, that's required in every position. I feel like I can do it pretty well and manage my workload pretty well. But the reason I gave it a pretty high rating is because when I certainly notice that I could feel stressed and tense internally. Kind of goes against my nature where I like to be as organized as possible. And consequently, when multitasking, I can become more tired and get distracted easily. I often don't feel as satisfied about maybe the quality of my work versus a time where I can really focus on one task and really get that one task down to the best detail and best quality. So multitasking will always be a challenge for me, but at least I'm aware of it, and I am working to manage it successfully.
And then for me, when I served as a Vista, I had 4 other Vistas in my cohort. And you can imagine that there was a whole range of personality types and communication and work styles and perspectives. So in order to really work effectively together, we really had to remind ourselves and each other of our end goal. This really kind of included a ton of sticky conversations, a bit of discomfort, and ultimately active listening and the integration of solutions that each person could agree on was something that we had to do. So I find my conflict resolution skills to be all right because of that. I also was an RA in college, and so that can really kick your conflict resolution skills into high gear, you know, having to manage your stress and assure other people that things will remain okay, but also making sure that you are really listening to what other people are saying and capturing things that aren't always said, right? There's always some nonverbal cues that you should be picking up on. Now, on the multitasking front, I personally love multitasking. It makes me feel like I have 8 arms and that I can do all things, but it's not necessarily a strong suit for me. I think at times it can be really hard to apply the same caliber of work to various tasks. But for me, a simple to-do list organized by due date and ease of completion is just fine. So multitasking, not the strongest for me, but I think in some instances it's better to apply more focus than multitasking sometimes allows.
And then moving on to prevention. So when feelings of burnout start to occur, many people focus on short-term solutions. Maybe it's taking time off, possibly getting some extra rest. And while this certainly helps, the relief these solutions provide can often only be temporary. So you'll want to develop coping skills that will serve you in long-term situations. Of course, there are no magical, immediate burnout prevention strategies. Wish there were. It's really about increasing self-care capacity and self-awareness. And because self-awareness can really be a loaded topic, we're going to highlight 4 of its core components. So we're going to start by discussing how to increase your emotional intelligence. So part of becoming more self-aware is understanding your own emotions and managing interpersonal relationships accordingly. Emotional intelligence, or often heard as EQ, is the ability to identify and manage emotions in positive ways. You can acquaint yourself with the practices of emotional intelligence to improve your communication and empathy. And we have, as you see in the image there, a small, inexpensive book we recommend on this topic is Emotional Intelligence 2.0 by Travis Bradbury and Jean Greaves. But there's plenty of other books and resources out there on emotional intelligence. Also key to increasing your self-awareness is certainly to reframe the situation. So even the worst situation can be beneficial to our learning with maybe a change in your perspective and perhaps sometimes just a deep breath. You'll be better equipped to problem solve constructively and glean nuggets of wisdom that may be of use both professionally and personally. It's a really overused expression, but it really works, where try to make lemonade out of lemons. So you'll also want to work with purpose. Be intentional about what you're doing. This will allow you to focus on the task at hand, lessening the overwhelm of really the bigger picture, which includes all the things you are responsible for. So we really want you to try to enjoy the small successes because they do add up to big ones eventually. And that's something that sometimes it's hard to see as a Vista because you're doing so much behind the scenes and you might not be able to see those the results firsthand, or at least physical results, but you're making a difference out there, and those small successes you're doing are adding up to a greater good. And then time management there at the bottom. So if you're not organized, your risk of working in chaos and crisis is high. I would recommend creating timelines for your Vista assignment description activities. That can certainly help. It'll also help you prioritize your responsibilities and work in general. On the Vista campus, there are some really great electronic time management tools that have been recommended by other Vistas in the past, and we've compiled a lot of those responses from Vistas into a one-page document. This is another link that is on the Helpful Links document there to download. So we definitely recommend it because they're resources provided by other Vistas. They know what you're going through, and they have provided these resources to help other Vistas. And so again, yeah, those are found to the bottom right of the slides. And we'll move on to self-care habits as well. So as Khadija mentioned earlier, setting good personal boundaries is key. And this requires you to be self-aware of your strengths, your vulnerabilities, and your capabilities. And of course, keeping in mind when you do and don't need help and when you need additional coaching and guidance should also be kept at the forefront. Many people struggle to maintain personal boundaries, maybe for fear of appearing aggressive or fear of looking like you're unwilling to assist others. And it's really a hard skill to master, not just for your Vista year, but for your future personal and professional experiences. Prioritizing the execution of boundaries will make you stronger and more confident. And then we have embrace your total self, strengths and vulnerabilities. Accept and love yourself. This strategy is not for the faint of heart. So some may think that this one is a little too touchy-feely, but the fact is that you are your most authentic self when you embrace your whole self. You don't worry about others rejecting you when you have completely accepted your vulnerabilities and not just your strengths. We all have them, so accept them and get comfortable with them. And then exercise and play regularly. If you don't go to the gym or have an exercise regimen, then maybe go for some long walks. Just keep moving. This releases those feel-good hormones in your brain, the dopamine and serotonin. It also helps your body release the tension it is holding, which prevents illness and a compromised immune system. Similarly, try to make time to play, however that may look for you. Any exercise will do, but ideally it's going to be something that you enjoy. For me personally, I don't like to go out for jogs or runs. I tend to get bored and it starts to feel like a chore to me. That's just my personal opinion. So I prefer team sports or maybe looking for a pickup game of basketball or soccer. But that's just me. Maybe when the weather is bad, I will go for a run with my dog. And then know what relaxes you. So relaxation techniques. So think about some of the things you each do to relax. This could be things like deep breathing, yoga, walking meditation, being out in nature, maybe relaxing by water, a lake, or a pool, or reading a good book. We all need to learn to relax. Don't skip out on this one, please, please, please. For me, it's personally, it's typically either listening to music, reading, or again, maybe a long walk with my dog. That's really relaxing for me. And honestly, it never ceases to amaze me how music in particular really works to calm me. And notice that both increasing your self-awareness and developing self-care habits include a blend of both internal and external modifications on your part. Adapting these strategies and others that you may implement ensures you stay in a state of balance and homeostasis and allows you to cope with your stressors in a way that helps prevent burnout.
Thanks for those self-care habits, Chris. Now we'd like to welcome Brittany Madison to the session. Brittany recently served as a Vista leader with the Alliance to End Hunger here in Washington, D.C. from 2017 to 2018. And Brittany also served with AmeriCorps State and National in 2009 to 2010. Brittany, thanks so much for joining us today. I'm pretty excited to hear how you kept yourself motivated.
All right. Thank you, Khadijah and Chris, for having me on this webinar today. As Khadijah mentioned, I recently served as a Vista leader here in D.C. The project I was working with was a national program, so I was the only Vista serving in my site, so it did get a little bit lonely at times. So for those of you that are also the only Vista at your site, I feel for you, and I'm hoping that some of the techniques I share with you today can help you get through the remainder of your service. So outside of my Vista service and working here as a member support specialist, I also am a dog owner, and he is a big, big part of my support system and my coping mechanisms. And I also like to practice and teach yoga. Sharing that passion of mine with other people is a great outlet and a great way for me to still get that feeling of direct service even when I don't get to interact with others in the community as much as I'm used to. So I'm here today to share 3 strategies that I implemented as a Vista leader and that I also shared with all of the members of my Vista team. The first one is to remember your why. There is a wonderful TED Talk by Simon Sinek. I believe the link to that TED Talk should be on the handouts with the list of resources. So I recommend that you all check this out after the webinar is over. And so remembering your why is, why did you decide to serve with AmeriCorps Vista? And what is the why of your sponsor organization? So the power of why talks about, certainly as Vista members, we're not serving for a paycheck, and sometimes we often don't get tangible outcomes of our service. But reflecting back on the reason why we're serving, what our organization is aiming to do in the community, can be a nice reminder and reflection point just to keep you motivated. So after watching this TED Talk, I recommend taking some time to reflect and write some notes about why you're serving, the positive impacts that are being made in your community, and just a nice little way to remember exactly why you're doing what you're doing. So I recommend putting that in a visible place at your desk. That way, when you're having a hard day maybe, you can look at that and get some motivation and keep you going. Secondly, it is important to both make and take time for yourself. So be sure that you are regularly making time to decompress outside of your service hours, whether that's using libraries and reading books, visiting parks, or going to water like Chris mentioned, or going to free community events. Just make sure that outside of your service hours, you're finding time to relax and just finding an outlet that works for you. For me, that also means taking a lot of long walks with my dog, practicing yoga, reading a lot of books, and the occasional Netflix binge. So stepping away from your computer and work as needed within the office and within reason is also a really, really helpful tool. I often like to take a quick afternoon walk, a few minutes with the daily crossword, or a few minutes just with a cup of coffee or tea away from my workspace can sometimes really be a good refresher and help me get through the rest of my day. And additionally, just a reminder that you're entitled to your 10 personal and medical days within your service year. So make sure that you're using them, and remember that mental health days are valid and necessary sometimes. If you find that you're nearing the end, the final month or 2 of your service term, and you've got a few extra personal days, make sure you check in with your supervisor and find an appropriate way to use up those personal days as you're entitled to them. And finally, I recommend connecting with other AmeriCorps volunteers. Having a support network of people who are familiar with your service year experience are very important people to lean on during your year. It can be hard with friends or family members questioning your service year, why are you working at such a low wage, or being surrounded by colleagues who maybe aren't aware of the realities of serving as a Vista. They don't know that you're working 3 jobs outside of the 40 hours a week you're doing at your service site. They don't know about the living stipend that you're living on or what you're doing to make ends meet. So connecting with other volunteers can be a really great resource. During my Vista Leader year, I supported the national project, as I mentioned, so I didn't have anyone else at my site, but I did make sure that I connected with other Vista leaders that were serving in the DC area, and we instituted monthly phone calls and the occasional lunch with each other. On my Vista team, one of the Vista members that was serving in a rural area of Ohio, she used her resources somehow to connect with all members serving in her county, and she created a monthly coffee meeting for all AmeriCorps service members. They had monthly coffee meetings, they organized service projects together, and she also organized trainings for these other AmeriCorps volunteers. So not only did she create a much-needed space for her to connect with other volunteers and have support system, but she also created a sustainable community of AmeriCorps volunteers that have continued on after she finished her service year. So we all recognize here at Vista, the NCS headquarters, all of us here have done our service years, and we recognize that completing a Vista year can be really difficult at times. But it's certainly easier if you take care of yourself and use your resources. So best of luck to all of you for the remainder of your Vista service, and please know that we're all here to support you.
Thanks so much for that, Brittany. That was really great to have your perspective on this call. I know that not all of the Vistas participating in this webinar have access to a Vista leader, so it's really helpful for them to be able to hear the Vista leader perspective. I did want to touch on a few things that you mentioned. Remembering your why, I think that was something that was an overlap from something that I had also mentioned, really kind of keeping that end goal or that reason for applying in mind, right? And a lot of us really do risk a lot sometimes or put off things that we want to do or prioritize Vista over other things. So it's really important to keep that at the forefront of your mind when trying to stay sane in all of the hecticness that can be Vista. Something also that I remember you saying is to really take and make time for yourself. I think that that's something that doesn't always happen a lot. Something as simple as eating lunch away from your desk, I know, is something that folks struggle with, and just that 30 minutes to an hour of mindfulness to yourself that's completely unwork related, I think is very key. And the third thing that you mentioned around connecting with other Vistas or other AmeriCorps volunteers, I think is very important. And I, in my Vista term, didn't get to take as much advantage of that because I had 4 other Vistas in my cohort, but there were so many other Vistas serving in my surrounding community that I could have reached out to. And so I'm excited to see all of you in the chat actively seeking each other out and calling out where you're serving and finding ways to connect. So that's very important. Over the years, we've heard that there's a few chief causes of stress and burnout for Vistas. And as we talk through these items, we'll provide some recommendations as to, and ask your input as well on these things. So we're going to have another poll question. We'd like to know what your experiences have been with these common Vista stressors. Please take a moment to think about what have been the biggest cause of stress in your Vista role. And if you can't decide which one to select, you can pick the one that first jumps to your mind and then fill out the poll on the right side of the screen. So the question is, which has been the biggest stressor so far during your Vista year? Is it unclear project goals or Vista assignment description? Maybe you are unsure of what you should be doing. Or is it that you are not sure really what your VAD is all about? Or is it that you have a lack of supervisor support? Is your supervisor maybe too busy or absent and unable to offer support? Or is it managing your budget and finances? Maybe things are okay in the office, but you're struggling with how to balance your limited Vista budget. I also recognize that there are other stressors, so if your main stressor wasn't mentioned, feel free to share in the chat what keeps you up at night or prevents you from focusing throughout the workday. Or maybe you have no stress at all. These are the lucky ones. If you select this option, I definitely want you to tell me in the chat what keeps you going and how to stave off that burnout.
Yes.
I'm definitely going to be taking notes on whatever you write, so please be as detailed as possible with that. So, Brittany, Chris, what do you think most people will say is the biggest stressor for their Vista service?
Oh, I think last year as a Vista leader, my members encountered each of these issues. Sometimes it was hard for our members to get their sponsoring organization or their community on board with bad goals. So they encountered some roadblocks, and that was a little bit frustrating. Similarly, lack of supervision or support, or really just sort of people that butt heads and can't communicate well. And if that's the case, I definitely recommend reaching out to your Vista leader or your state office and seeing if you can sort of have a mediation and just find a better way to communicate. And then managing budget and finances is certainly always a stressor for Vista members. Like I said, I worked a few additional jobs throughout my service term, and I know a lot of my service members did too. And even then, things can get rough if something unexpected comes up. So I'd say they're all pretty fair game.
Yeah, yeah.
That's fair. It's looking like most people responded saying that there are other stressors. So we'll want to be looking in the chat for those. And then second was managing your budget and finances. And then a close third was unclear project goals or Vista assignment description. Huh. Does anyone see any one response that is worth highlighting?
Yeah, so I see someone that mentions just like the emotionally draining and stressful aspect of their job being a stressor, which is very valuable. We're all working on different kinds of projects, and some of them might have more stressful content than others.
It looks like there's also some people that are also in school at the same time, and so having competing priorities or just deadlines that overlap can be a stressor.
I think a really important one brought up is a big stressor is the type of emotionally draining work that I do, reading about domestic violence, sexual assault, human trafficking, and sharing that impact in the community. Yeah, certainly could cause, could be a huge stressor.
I also see the biggest stressor has been internalizing all the correct information in order to do my job correctly. That's definitely something that we've heard both in the webinars and at our in-service trainings as causes for stress. Really just wanting to be on point all the time and not wanting to mess up as the Vista can definitely be a stressor. Even just determining what to do day to day if it's unclear. So these are definitely all really key responses. Thanks so much for contributing. We're going to dig a little bit more into detail on some of these. So first up, we're going to talk about unclear project goals or Vista assignment description. So your success as a Vista is dependent on your being clear about your project goals and the sponsoring organization's expectations of you. And in many of our Vista member orientations, and as I said, the in-service trainings, perhaps the number one item that Vistas identify as causing anxiety or stress is a lack of clarity around their goals and their job expectations. Another issue is really being asked to do something that's not a part of your Vista assignment description, and sometimes that includes direct service. So let's discuss some of the ways that we can address these issues. The first might be to ask your supervisor for a copy of the project application and the project plan. So there are documents that your sponsoring organization needed to submit to the Corporation for National and Community Service when they applied for the Vista grant. And so they'll be able to provide you with an opportunity to have background information about your project goals and your roles and responsibility in achieving them. So do make sure to ask your supervisor for a copy of the project application and project plan just so that you can get a sense of what exactly is expected of you. And this is a document that is best reviewed by yourself first. I would recommend jotting down a few questions or comments or concerns you might have about that project plan or application and talking about that with your supervisor. This is a really great meeting to set up so that you're on the same page. Next is to reference back to your Vista roadmap notes on what to ask your supervisor. So if you haven't already, do so to help initiate the foundation for communication with your supervisor. We'd also recommend that you use your Vista assignment description as the focal point to all your supervisory meetings. So your Vista assignment description is essentially your job description, right? So to ensure productive supervisory meetings, you'll want to make sure that your Vista assignment description is really the focal point. So you'll want to update it, clarify it, provide any feedback on accomplishments or maybe challenges that you may be experiencing, any specific timelines that you or your supervisor has come up with. You'll want to make sure that you note these. You'll also want to discuss goal achievement and frustrations that you may be experiencing in order to get a more clear and cohesive conversation flowing between you and your supervisor, right? It's important to have your supervisor be fully aware of what's going on for you. You don't want to pretend that everything is smooth sailing. You want to be as transparent with them as possible. This will make sure that your priorities are attended to, right? So remember that your VAD is an ongoing dynamic document, and it's your roadmap to success. So do be sure to include that as the focal point of those meetings. Next, you'll want to evaluate just how much of your work you're doing and how much of it is not related to your Vista assignment description. Identify if you have accepted other non-Vista assignment description related assignments. And sometimes in our enthusiasm, we take on other duties, which really can subtract from our time to carry out our actual Vista assignment description assignments. So if any work that you're doing is not VAD related and interferes with your ability to meet your specific timelines, then you're going to definitely want to bring this to your supervisor's attention, and together you'll need to problem solve and make intentional choices about how you're going to restructure your work so that you're doing the work that has actually been assigned to you. And if talking to your supervisor does not relieve this stress, then you'll want to seek the guidance of the person who has oversight for your project and or the state office. So for those of you who have experienced this, what other ideas do you have? Feel free to respond in the chat. Just what are some ways that you have coped with your unclear project goals or your Vista assignment description? So I see Audrey says that they organize daily tasks, stay focused, stop for 5 to 10 minutes and take a deep breath, stand, walk around your desk. I definitely walk around my desk all the time. You can ask Chris. He sits next to me, and I'm hardly ever sitting there. What else?
Take it day by day and set weekly goals. Don't expect it to be done all at once. Definitely good words to live by.
We seeing any other unclear project goal or VAD-related coping strategies?
Great. Well, my computer's lagging just a bit, but they're starting to come in.
Weekly meetings with your supervisor has helped. Sean? Meeting with the supervisor, again, when feeling lost or needing guidance or mentorship. I do see, and I do want to address this because I have seen multiple Vistas responding in the chat saying that they feel really kind of just bad or weird or awkward going to talk to their site supervisor. So your supervisor is there for your support. You should not in any way feel bad about going to talk to them about what is their duty, right? It's a part of their job is to support you. They are obviously coming at this Vista thing from a totally different perspective, and so they won't know yours if you don't share it. So it's really in your best interest to share all of these things with your supervisor. And actually being open and honest with your supervisor creates the space for them to be open and honest with you. So I definitely want to make sure that I touch on that so that people will not feel discouraged from meeting with their supervisors. I'm just going to say one more thing that I see here. I see Rosa says, we have weekly goals. Also, the staff and me take, it's going away. Come back. We have weekly goals. The staff and me take time to practice yoga, walk, and breathing exercises. Also have a small room. You can rest or take a nap if needed. Very good. All right, let's move on to our next big stressor, which is lack of supervisor support. So this is a really great segue into this. So Vistas who serve at a distance or whose supervisor is not necessarily available on a consistent basis will often feel frustration because they have little or no direction. So let's get a little bit specific about the possible causes of having little or no support and some possible recommendations for managing this challenge. So for a supervisor who does not meet with you on a regular basis, it is critical that you establish fixed meeting times with your supervisor. And this is typically done during your on-site orientation and training. I'm sure that most of you are beyond this point, so you'll want to make sure that you set up these regular meetings. And this is not just like you walked past the pantry and you see your supervisor and you have a quick little check-in. This is something that you schedule. It's on both of your calendars, and you're expected to come prepared and ready each time. So I'd say that 20% of their time is assigned to the Vista project. So you'll want to make sure that efficiency is a priority. Because many supervisors only do have that small percentage of time dedicated to the Vista project. But if your supervisor cannot make the meetings, then you might want to discuss other ways that you can get the guidance that you require. So perhaps they have an assistant that you can talk with, or maybe phone calls are the way to go. But I'd say that the most important thing is to really understand what prevents your supervisor from meeting with you and create other options to accommodate. So some reasons why a supervisor might not be able to meet with you might include that your supervisor is off-site much of the time. So if your supervisor's responsibilities keep them out of the office, then maybe you can meet with them out in the community. It's really important to problem solve this issue with your supervisor and not allow yourself to feel neglected, which only creates more stress. So make some time to think about the ways that your supervisor is or is not able to show up for you and work around that. There might also be long-distance service assignments. So if you are a part of a national organization, you may find yourself a distance from your Vista supervisor and or your Vista leader. Vistas in rural areas can often feel isolated. So be clear about what you need and be intentional about getting those needs met. I'd say that in both cases, FaceTime or Skype or any other video chat mechanism is an easy solution for a supervisor who is out of the office a lot. A long meeting doesn't always mean that it's effective, right? So another option is to really use a Vista leader if you have one, or other Vista members. Vista leaders may be present when there are 6 or more Vistas working in the same area, and they have a very specific role, which includes coaching and mentoring, being a liaison, a resource developer, a facilitator, an educator, and so much more, as Brittany was mentioning earlier. A leader can really be a great option for giving you the support that you need. So for those of you participating in this webinar that have a lack of supervisor support, what are some ideas that you have or have used that have benefited you when your supervisor was perhaps not as available as you would have liked. Multiple attendees are typing. Reach out to other people in the office who work on similar projects for input. Seeking out different resources. Bringing your supervisor into a call with the state office to assert that she should not be delegating her responsibilities to you. Research on other topics related to your VAD. Alrighty, so I hope that you all will continue to post your responses. And I would say the more detailed your responses, the better, right? It's great that you have other resources, but be a little bit more specific so that you can assist your fellow Vista colleagues with strategies that they might be able to use in their service.
Okay, great. Yeah, as Khadija mentioned, keep those suggestions coming in, and another one, managing your budget, a really popular one. So it's no secret that the Vista living allowance is one of the most common stressors that Vistas face. I mean, it's not a ton of money, so we get it. Y'all all get it. So we want to try to provide some recommendations, many of which were provided by other Vistas in the past, for coping with your financial limitation, or at least to help out. So first, create a budget and stick to it. And this will not be easy, especially if, for those of you who are needing to find a room or apartment to rent, as opposed to others who may have the advantage of living at home with parents or guardians. Rent will be a large part of your budget, so obviously you have to try to be creative. On the Vista campus, they have a lot of resources related to creating a budget. We've included links to those budgeting resources in the helpful links document. So many Vistas have provided feedback on this for tips, tricks, and just helpful hints in terms of managing a budget. And then inform your supervisor of any special financial challenges you may be facing. So they may know of resources to assist you with coping with your challenges. That's why we recommend this strategy. Some organizations provide resources to Vistas to help them live on their stipend. Such support that we've seen have included maybe providing a transportation allowance and identifying supermarkets with lower costs in the area. That could especially be for those who may have relocated and still learning the area. At the very least, it can't hurt to reach out to your supervisor for any tips. And then team up with other Vistas to share costs. Whether it's sharing rentals or go shopping for food together, share rides to and from your organization if possible. For Vistas who are serving in an area where there aren't any other Vistas in the area, which we've seen in the chat, hey, I don't have Vistas around me, I'm not working with any other Vistas. There's still the opportunity to share ideas in our digital age. Whether that's through the campus discussion forums, we have the Vista map to connect with other Vistas, and we also, similar to the above budgets, we have a list of cost-saving ideas for living on their living allowance. This one, again, was generated by Vistas a little while ago. It's about a year and a half ago. And that link is also on the helpful links document. So there's some really good ideas about living on the living allowance, and also we recommend the campus discussion forums to reach out to other Vistas and share tips. And then part-time employment, that's an opportunity. You can find part-time work to supplement your stipend, but that will require you to be very organized and very intentional about how you balance your Vista time. Whether it's Vista time, work time, and your rest time, so you don't overwhelm yourself. So this is one area where where again, we want to know what other recommendations you all may have to share with other Vistas. If you have some, we would love to see them in the chat to see how we can live on the living allowance and manage that Vista budget. So we're going to, my computer is showing multiple attendees are typing. So give it a second, see any ideas coming in the chat. Looks like a couple were mentioning, reaching out for SNAP benefits. Don't forget to apply for those.
Carpooling when possible. I see Kara just dropped a link. Not sure what it is, but if you click it, you'll find out.
My second year is a motivation to stay. My Vista site provided 150 gas benefits.
Shared living spaces, carpooling, roommates are literally a lifesaver.
Yes.
DIY ethics, SNAP benefits, take the edge off, second job on the weekends.
When I was at Vista, I did a lot of babysitting and dog walking.
Ooh, I see Kayla says use Excel sheets to track spending and see the areas you can be spending less.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Food coupons. Find a part-time job that helps you explore another interest or that helps you care for yourself in some way. Mine keeps me on my feet, which is a nice change of pace from my Vista office job. Thanks, Sean. House, animal, or babysitting. Thrift shopping, my personal favorite.
Ditch the car, ride a bike. I like it.
Online job as a part-time.
Hey.
Meal prep. This is a really good one.
Awesome. Please keep those coming in. So as we move on, we have identified a few next steps in terms of some easy next steps that we recommend and that we went over. And the first is to really try that Mind Tools survey, that 15-question one that we first talked about, to identify your risk for burnout. And then after that, we recommend using the Stress Awareness Survey, the 20-question one that's on the Vista campus, to identify what your stressors are and how you manage them. And then after doing that, then in the long term, you can use this information to increase your coping skills. And just a reminder again, because we often get, I know we've mentioned it a few times, but we always get questions, links to both of these resources are found in the Helpful Links document. And we've also listed a few additional resources that we haven't yet mentioned in the Helpful Links, such as there's a Vista Leader Stress Guide. This can also be found in the Leader section of the Vista campus under Action Learning. And even though this was written by Vista leaders, its contents certainly apply to Vista members as well. It is a very thorough treatment of the kind of stressors that Vistas and Vista leaders encounter during their year and offers a lot of surveys to increase your self-awareness and as well as many suggestions on how to manage your stressors. So we certainly recommend that, and there's a link there. It's on the Vista campus. Another recommendation you may want to explore could be the Relaxation and Stress Reduction Workbook by Martha Davis. And this is an interactive workbook that has received really excellent reviews to help people better identify and cope with their stressors. It's pretty inexpensive and can be found on Amazon easily. So now I will turn this over to Khadijah.
Thanks, Chris. So we want to know what you thought. How can we improve this presentation for future Vista members? Let us know what worked for you and what didn't work for you. Please take a few moments to complete a brief survey. Thanks so much in advance for sharing your feedback. In order to access the link to the survey, you'll want to first highlight or select the link in the pod, and then click Browse To. Please note that double-clicking that link will not work. And for those of you on a smartphone or a tablet, the survey link pod may not work for you, but we will post the link in the chat. And while we are getting those evaluations in, we will take some of the questions that we have seen come into the Q&A pod. So I did want to address the one that I think I saw coming up the most, which was related to the living allowance. And there were questions kind of surrounding, you know, if CNCS knows that the living allowance is really such a major cause of stress and burnout for Vistas, then why is the living allowance so low? So very good questions. And I do want to just say that the living allowance is calculated at a daily rate. It helps members with coverage for housing, food, utilities, and other basic necessities. So this is not intended to be a paycheck, but is a living allowance. And that amount of the living allowance really varies by the county that you're serving in, and the rate is a function of the Domestic Volunteer Service Act. So changing this would be very difficult. It also takes into consideration the annual poverty guidelines and fair market rates. So each of those components are what contribute to the calculation of the Vista Living Allowance rates, and they're not really easy to change. It would require a lot of legislative talking, right? That would take several, it would take quite a long time, I imagine, to change that. And of course, I did also see some questions related to, you know, sort of being matched at or making the same living allowance at around the poverty level of where you're serving as some sort of bonding or kind of communal get-together. That's not the intention of the living allowance. So the amounts are low because you're expected to live at approximately the same economic level as the people you're serving, but we don't intend to convey that you will fully understand what it means to live in poverty or that you are somehow going to have a shared bond based on that. So I just wanted to make that note very clear, that that's not the intention, is to create some sort of social experiment or bond based on the low living allowance. Another thing that I saw mentioned often was about Vista leaders and how Vista leaders are assigned. So sometimes we'll refer to Vista leaders as simply leaders, and leaders really serve in large Vista projects or by region. So Vista leaders really aim to expand and build capacity of Vista members, and sometimes in Vista summer associates. They'll lead or coordinate with projects that they're serving. So Vistas don't function as employees of the Corporation for National and Community Service, and they're also not replacements for Vista supervisors. So Vista leaders are leaders and not supervisors or CNCS employees. But they do have very strategic roles, and they have specific focus areas, which include recruitment, retention, and performance. So really that's the function of a Vista leader, and that's how they are assigned. Let's see what else I see. How to connect to other Vista members if I don't have a Vista serving at my site.
Yeah, that's a big one, and we certainly want to encourage you to reach out to other Vistas, especially on this topic. Avoiding burnout, a lot of times it takes that ability to connect with someone who can empathize, who's sharing your experience, or who has shared your experience in the past. So for those who don't have any other Vistas in the area, we certainly recommend checking out the Vista Campus discussion forums. There's a Vista map where you can see other Vistas serving throughout the country, so you can possibly see others that are somewhat close to you, maybe not right next door, but you might be able to meet up. I know Brittany had that great suggestion where someone was having a monthly meetup for coffee with Vistas in the county. That could be something you might be able to reach out to other Vistas in the area for, or set something up on the discussion forums. And aside from the Vista campus, you could also reach out to your CNCF state office to maybe see if they have any suggestions on, because they're going to know Vistas, other Vistas in the area might be able to point you in the right direction. If feasible, it's certainly an option.
Certainly. And I did see a question related to, being overly stressed or burnt out to the point of wanting to withdraw from the program altogether. So I was hoping that Brittany, you could speak a little bit to this, because I know there might be some Vista leaders on this webinar who are having to manage their own stress and also are being used as a resource for other Vista members and might be in need of some support on how to kind of keep their stressors at bay in order to support other Vistas.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of my favorite quotes, I don't have it right in front of me right now, so I'm going to paraphrase it, is those who bring sunshine to the lives of others cannot help but to keep it from themselves. And I think that is 100% the life of a Vista leader, is just trying to spread that sunshine and support to our Vista members throughout their service year. I always kept in mind that where I might have been struggling and having a difficult time, I remember back to when I did state and national, I just had this amazing supervisor, and she was always just shining her sunlight on me and the rest of our team. So as a Vista leader, I try to keep that in mind and just remember that I was paying it forward to future Vista members who would hopefully go on to be Vista leaders themselves. And in doing so, it sort of is a feel-good. So I sent this response to someone in the Q&A. If you're a Vista leader, every once in a while, if one of your members sends you a really sweet thank you email, or someone at your organization does, don't be ashamed to print that out and stick it somewhere visible at your desk, or create a little folder in your inbox, just a place to keep those thank yous and those reminders that you are doing good work and your value is seen throughout your organization and your team. And I really hope that helps you get through the rest of your year. It certainly helps me, knowing that I was helping others.
Awesome. I did also see a question related to who's kind of in charge of creating the Vista set hours. So some places have 40-hour work weeks, right? And some places a full work week might be 35 hours or 37 hours. This is not a Vista program standard. It's really up to that sponsoring organization, and whatever is a full-time work at your organization is what you're expected to do. I do see that a lot of you mentioned in the chat things related to, well, how can we be expected to not burn out if we're on call 24/7? So you should not be expected to be overexerting yourself or working well beyond a full work week, right? If folks are asking for you to be doing things outside of your Vista assignment description, I think it's very important that you self-advocate and be very firm in what your Vista assignment description says, and make sure that you're not taking on more than is necessary. Additionally, occasionally you might have some weekend, maybe there's a service project or something like that, but you should not be expected to be supplanting staff or doing duties that maybe your understaffed office is in charge of carrying out but doesn't have the people power to execute. So make sure that you're self-advocating, referring to your VAD, and reaching out to your key resources when you feel you're being used inappropriately. Let's see. I did see another question related to part-time jobs and whether or not your second part-time job needs to be under the state poverty level. So I would say that no, your part-time job doesn't need to be under your state poverty level And now that I'm scrolling down on the question, it's looking like the question, the full extent of the question is, does the part-time job need to be under the state poverty level in order for me to keep our end of service award? So no, your VISTA assignment is what solidifies your ability to receive your education award so long as you successfully complete your full year of service. I would say the only thing your part-time job needs to do is be in compliance with your VISTA service. It needs to be approved by your supervisor, and it cannot interfere with what you're doing in your standard VISTA service.
And I did see one in the chat earlier, just as an FYI, that all Vistas, for your year of service, you get 10 personal days and 10 health days. So when Brittany was mentioning, make sure to take a mental health day because sometimes those are important, or maybe a half day. I know someone had mentioned they weren't aware that there were 10 personal and 10 health days, so just wanted to point that out in case anyone else wasn't sure about that.
Absolutely. And you will not need, I know a few folks had questions about whether or not you needed a doctor's note for your sick days, and no, you will not need a doctor's note for your sick days. And as Brittany mentioned, mental health days are also okay. If you woke up one day and you're just like not feeling 100%, and that not feeling 100% will contribute to your inability to successfully complete your VISTA duties for that day, then absolutely take that time to mentally recharge. I'm not seeing any more questions coming into the to the Q&A, so be sure if you have a question, please post it in the Q&A. The chat is scrolling pretty quickly, so we're not able to keep up with you there. But if you have any questions, please be sure to post them there.
And one last thing, Khadijah, I did want to say, because someone was saying they couldn't print the handouts, we definitely want you to have access to those links we referred to. So if you aren't able to print them, please just send a request to vistatraining@cns.gov, and I'm actually going to type that in the chat right now. And just send a simple request, and we'll send those handouts to you.
And I do continue to see questions related to leave. So I do want to point you all to Chapter 9 of the VISTA Member Handbook on leave benefits. I'm going to drop that link into the chat right now for folks to be able to check out your leave provisions. I do see a question. What's the best method to use when contacting your supervisor in regards to you taking a mental health day? So good question, Jasmine. You don't need to explain anything like this to anyone. All you would have to do is send whatever communication method you have agreed upon with your supervisor. So for me, it might be a text message or an email. I would simply say, good morning, Barbara, I woke up today not feeling 100%. It's in my best interest to use today as a personal sick day, and I will be in the office tomorrow. Feel free to reach out to me then, would be something that I might say. If you are not feeling comfortable with that, I would definitely practice that with another person, but you definitely want to advocate for yourself and make sure that you are taking the days that you need. I would not advise you to say more than is needed. Whatever you do to maintain your personal equilibrium or homeostasis is up to you, and I don't think that you need to share that with your supervisor. So I wouldn't include any details that you wouldn't be comfortable with them having.
And still looking through. Khadija, do you see any others?
Let's see.
I'm going to check in, reading. What's the best method to use when contacting your supervisor in regards to you taking a mental health day? That was what Khadija just went through, okay?
Oh, I do see another one asking how to locate other vistas on the campus.
Oh, yeah. Was that recently? Yeah, that was where we were mentioning there's the Vista Campus discussion forum. So if you just go to vistacampus.gov and select the members area, log into your account, and you can find the discussion forums and post and find other vistas there. There's also a Vista Campus map those links are right on the left-hand side when you go to the member section of the Vista campus.
Excellent. And Chris will drop that link in the chat in just a second. I do also see a question related to mental health services and finding affordable options. So I personally have used Psychology Today to find therapy and counseling options. I've also had a lot of success on the Open Path Collective, particularly the Open Path Collective. They offer sliding scale services between, I believe, $40 and $60 a session, which is very much cheaper than the standard $175 to $200 a session. It's called, again, the Open Path Collective, and you can specify therapists by race, by sexual orientation, and a whole host of other things that you might be coping with. So I definitely recommend going onto the internet and searching that up. And they also offer, depending on the therapist that you find, they'll offer chat that's remote, right? So you can chat with them on a HIPAA compliant video chat service, and it's quite good to have that as an option, because I know that mental health services are not always the most economical. All right. I see one more question, and it's saying, how do you go about your partner's site without overstepping boundaries, yet trying to put yourself out there more? So I'm not sure that I understand the extent of the question, but if I am gathering this correctly, it sounds like you might have a sub-site that you'd like to explore perhaps, and you're wanting to see what that site's all about without making it appear that you are overstepping in some kind of a way. So I would certainly talk to your supervisor about ways that you can connect with sites related to your organization, or even other staff people that are at your organization. I think there's always room for cross-departmental learning, and a lot of the things that Vista's experience is easily transferable to other jobs and other positions. So I would absolutely advocate for going on a site visit. Your supervisor might even want to attend that first visit, but certainly wouldn't hurt to talk to your supervisor about ways to interact with other organizations or other sites related to your service.
Yeah, especially if it has to do with your VAD and your objectives. You could fit that right into a meeting with your supervisor as a suggestion to to visit, if that's what we're understanding correctly. But or even if you have a VAD that maybe is a bit limited and you think isn't as detailed and need a few other objectives clarified, again, you want to speak with your supervisor on that in your meetings, and you could go over that, and that might be a perfect opportunity to try to make a few suggestions as long as that's approved for your VAD.
All right, so that is just about all the time we have today. And I want to thank you again for your participation and your attendance in this webinar. We hope that you can join us for the next one. Check the webinars page on the Vista campus to sign up for future webinars, and we hope to see you again soon. Thanks so much.